Hi guys, Hengist here from House of Hengist Comics, and a big welcome back to the channel, Old Beans and Beansters too. Well, today we're back in BLITKRIEG. This is episode 46, part of our Sky Blitz series over the Netherlands, Waalhaven, the prequel. First, as usual, the news. And we're going to return to May the 10th, 1940 over the Netherlands. One of the most important operations, really, part of this early stage of the war. Now, the Germans had used effectively parachute operations in Norway and Denmark, but now they've really combined this to operate as well with ground forces in a major, innovative and new approach, and something Holland just wasn't prepared for. In fact, none of the Allies were. They were going to basically jump down a narrow corridor and effectively produce a rollback for 9th Panzer to drive into the heart of the Netherlands, capturing The Hague and all of that. Now, previously, we've done quite a lot of work, and we won't need to go over a lot of old ground. Suffice to say that Ibn Amal was critical, and you need to look at that in terms of how innovative it was, and also the effect it has on the Allied timings. Now, in the operations that we see going on over Willemsdorp, which is to the north of the bridge, and obviously at Moerdijk, a key component part is the refit and resupply. Now, part of that would require them to get a forward air operational base, and this is what our series is going to be about, this mini-series on Waalhaven. It's about the taking of that airfield so that they can provide logistical support effectively to the ground forces, these paratroopers. And as we've seen through the battles that we've done so far, I mean, the Fallschirmjäger are incredibly well trained, in a great position, but a lot of things connect, such as this bus that came from Waalhaven and ends up at Willemsdorf with infantry upon it. The attack across those bridges has been really tough, and we're going to be doing other bridge combats, including at Dordrecht, where we started with some earlier operations. But there are huge and staggering casualties to be paid in the air fleet, the transport air fleet for Germany. So when we're looking at the research for this, and this episode is really going to be about how we've structured this war game, and thanks to Campaign Sam, a very, very thorough analysis was produced, and we took the original photographs, we looked at what was going on, and we wanted to recreate something and do something a little bit different. So we wanted to look really at the logistical side of supporting a parachute operation, which I don't think anyone's really done before. And again, with us, we like to look at things that are going to make a good testing war game. So based on a lot of research, we built effectively the concepts for what we wanted to do, based off the maps, based off the photographs. And we started to develop a picture of what we really, really wanted to look at. And that was landing your air fleet, bringing it in, securing the airfield, holding it against counterattack, and keeping those runways open. Now you can see the debris and debitage all over these airfields. Now this was caused not just from aircraft being shot down, but from the artillery strikes and bombing runs that were subsequently launched in counterattacks against the airfield. So this is going to be quite interesting to do. We've got to look at how we're going to manage air operations. And we also want to set something that's challenging. Now the landscape to this battle means we needed a lot of space. Now we had an 11 foot by 5, but we still found that small, and there are key things that need to go into it. And once you start putting aircraft and buildings and things like that, you run out of space. Also, if we make it too big, there's so much more to make. So it was a bit of a commodification of what we've been doing, but I'm really pleased with it. And from our research, critical was that war over Holland. Thoroughly recommend that on the web, guys. Have a look. Sky Blitz, I keep referring to this, is a great one to examine the parachute operations from live footage. And of course, an excellent seminal piece, The Battle of the Netherlands, again on YouTube. So a big part of today is about the preparation to help people develop ideas, and we started with what we had. We thought we were going to work in Fomex. That was probably the best medium to try and rebuild lots of crashed aircraft and see what we could do with it, using knives and files and basic stuff. We're not going to spend a fortune every episode. We want to do it on the cheap, and we want to encourage us to think about things and then basically pass these ideas on. So Fomex is an insulation board. It is really great to sand and work with, but it is very, I suppose the word is friable. It can break very easily, and you've got to be careful. That's okay building wrecked aircraft, and we were using a lot of wood filler, like a speckle that you would say in America, to give it coats so that we could build up where we'd over-sand it or under-sand it, or it wasn't quite straight. And we started to build up and repair, and we were actually quite impressed with what we were doing. And we then got even more ideas. What can we do with this stuff? We're not going to waste it. And so we built more and more crashed aircraft. Now we can use this is critical, for other operations, including Krieg, and hopefully when we do Malta, because we want to see the as if on that parachute operation into Malta. We've got all the data on that. So here you can start to see us putting all these rubbed down aircraft, they're not quite finished, onto bases, putting the filler on it, building it up, holding it together with cocktail sticks and God knows what else, and then adding the sort of detail that we want to. Now we get that from bits and pieces, and I've used just about anything, you know, from plastic tubing to matchsticks to paper clips, anything that we could build to try and make this look like, you know, debris from the aircraft and from the photographs we've seen. All of this is possible, and it didn't take as long as we thought. The big problem really was having the confidence to cut the thing out and then start sanding to scale. That wasn't easy, by no means, but we started to master it as we got further on through the project. So some of the earlier stuff isn't so good as some of the later stuff, and we were starting to get more and more creative as we went, as you can see. But the hardest job, without doubt, for me, having built 15mm ships out of balsa wood and the wood filler, was recreating aircraft. Now, we found a few that we got from, I think it was Old Glory 15mm UK. They got an air section there, 1/100 aircraft. Check it out, pretty good value as well, guys. But we also wanted ground equipment. We had to make searchlights out of this old Vallejo tops there. Buy 187 stuff, which was very cheap on eBay, and we found in some model shops. And you know, you start to build up a panoply of material and information which you can beautifully just sort of scatter throughout the set, making it far more interesting than just an open flat table. So ultimately you get things that you can reuse, like these tops that I've used and turned into tanks. You know, I've used tin foil to create tarp areas and all sorts of stuff. Just try and, as I said, get that immersion, get the real feel for it, including an extremely long process of cutting out loads and loads of fencing, sticking it one plastic card onto the other, and then matchstick support, because we identified critically, as Sam pointed out, the fence and where the Dutch were deployed were on the wrong side of the fence. So another critical component, which again Fearless Phil and of course Rude Boy Craig were to be brilliant in, was building the hangar. And again, to get that scale, it's quite a big piece, you know, and it goes on the table. But getting that G1 Fokker, the fighter, and also the bomber as well, was tough. And it's the first time I've done it, and yeah, I made lots of mistakes, and you just go with what you can. But these were critical aircraft, couldn't find them anywhere. Damn it, we've got to build them. And although it took time, I'm actually quite pleased with where we got, because it taught me a lot. And this is the other thing about wargaming. It's not just about painting tanks and figures, it's about building sets and building material to make your games go really well. Dave Doherty does massive work on the Sedan, James McMillan as well on his stuff. They build stuff themselves to make this really good. And the game's more immersive. So ultimately, you know, my final bomber, I was quite pleased with. She's a Dutch bomber with a 20mm cannon in the nose, believe it or not. A beautiful aircraft. I don't think she was used in the Pacific, but they will be coming in, bombing the airfield, and obviously going to be attacked by German aircraft on intercept if they're there. So, you know, once I've sort of glued and painted and put PVA washes over it, I spray them, and then the painting process really kicks it into the end. But yeah, learnt a huge amount. Could do better next time. Perhaps I can. But the point is, I'm not frightened to have a go at this sort of stuff. And sometimes I think we can get over-reliant on just buying stuff. But when that stuff isn't there and you really want to bring out the history, you've got to be prepared to roll your sleeves up and dig in. So you can see with hopefully what we've done, we've now produced the material that we are going to need for this game. And that is really critical, because we don't want the German commanders who are under the test and spotlight, if you forgive my pun, today on how they are going to effectively land their aircraft, keep their airfield open, and they're going to be dealing with lots of threats and problems, and they need flexibility. They need options, and that's part of a war game, observing how these things take place. So the next stage of what we need to look at in this episode is just what are the parameters for this war game. So setting the war game is really the hardest part of this. A huge amount had to be designed based on the maps and the information we got. Problem one was obviously commodifying it. So we really had to sort of shrink the set a little bit and try and add the key component parts. Then we've got really 3 phases to the operation. The first is obviously going to be the parachute landings, and they are going to basically be on a season hold with a finite turn limit. In the midst of this, we've got the operational aspects to the airfield as they try and scramble aircraft into the air. And then most importantly, we've also got what is going on in terms of flight scheduling, the air combat. And this is quite complex to be able to do, so we had to commodify that into a series of shooting and defense and close assault, working very similar to the current rules we use. So it was going to be shoot, defensive fire, and then a close assault with an outcome. We use obviously our own system for damage and things like that, which is cross-transferable. But in terms of building the set, we had the materials available to do that. Once we compressed the set, we knew what we wanted to do. And of course the third phase, and the most difficult phase, is to bring in the aircraft, subject to anti-aircraft fire when it's appropriate, and off-table artillery. So ultimately the defence of the airfield will be comprised of both infantry forces positioned around the airfield, the forces that are defending the airfield in terms of anti-aircraft and the like, and then we've got air. So the whole thing is quite a complex thing to put together, and why we went for a scheduling board. Now the scheduling board also dictates and was set by German and Dutch forces before the game, neither having any idea which turns they allocated things to, which made it very interesting when the stats went up on the board, you know, where there was going to be air contact. And the Germans had to think very, very carefully about what they were doing, and that was the premise from the outset. So what we've ultimately got is the parachute operations preceded by bombing runs from the Luftwaffe as they come and hit that airfield. But they've limited themselves to only 50 kilogram bombs because they don't want to wreck the airfield that they then want to land upon. And this was an issue. The Dutch are pretty much unaware. The shock and awe's in operation. Before this was actually in the real world, so to speak, before the actual action took place, there had been a preceding inspection of which one of the Dutch commanders was furious about how the troops had been deployed. He thought that the whole airfield was very poorly deployed. And so what transpires next is that it was too late to do anything, but they were expecting ground attacks, not paratroopers, and this was the case for much of what was going on in Holland. And so we'll have the jumps coming in with a number of commanders operating different infantry landing and then trying to seize the airfield very quickly within about 60 minutes, 6 turns. So it's going to be fast, it's going to be dangerous, and there's lots of risk because there's unforeseen enemy activity. There's the battle decks that we roll, as you know, which have historical events, the weather, anything can happen. So that's a tough operation in itself. And then landing, of course, bombing, landing, all of that type of thing is equally tough. Anything can happen, go wrong, go right, and the whole thing is built into this beautiful frictional situation in which the commander has to make tough decisions. He has to think outside of the box, and he's basically got to deliver his outcome. If he fails to do that, Dordrecht will fall, because it won't be reinforced and it won't get the ammunition it needs, and ultimately the disaster which really occurred around The Hague for the Fallschirmjäger as well will come into even shorter existence. So the whole thing is a really tough, dangerous sort of operation, and one that we really enjoyed putting together. So I hope you've enjoyed what we've done today, what we're just sort of setting the scene for. In the next episode, we will be looking at specifically the first phases, which is the bombing runs, the parachute drops, the seizing or attempted seize of the airfield, and then we will start by the air landing operation. This is Blitzkrieg. Stay tuned, stay safe, bye for now.